Okay, well, great. Thanks. Panicky moment over. Welcome from sunny-ish Birmingham. I'm going to talk for maybe 30, 40 minutes. I've got lots of videos to show, so just relax and enjoy yourself. So, been interested in drones for a few years from a military and a medical aspect. And what I'll try and do over 30, 40 is try and just draw a few threads together about where we are and where we aren't in regard to drones, and the concept, the benefits, the advantages. And I think that no matter what, it's the future that is coming for you all. I can't quite see all the chat and stuff like that, but anyone wants to hazard a guess as to on the chat maybe when the first ever drone strike was? Okay, well, actually, it was 1944. People think it was perhaps more recent than that. There were a lot of drones actually used in the Second World War. This is an interstate TDR built by the Wurlitzer Organ Company, or the Interstate Organ Company, and it was a remotely piloted drone that could be flown onto a target. And even in those days, 1944, the plane itself, this is the drone itself. You can see top right, there's a nose cone camera. So the guys would follow behind in a modified plane with basically a green television screen, and they could fly the plane onto its target. So even in 1944, we had drone strikes. It was in the Bougainville Islands in the Pacific. You can go back to 1917 and the Kettering bug, but this was just launched on rails, actually pretty much as the precursor to the V1 rockets. They were non-guided but just were flown towards vaguely the enemy trenches, no control, and away they went. Things got a bit more specific actually then when they used these are called Weary Willies. They're old worn out B-17 bombers, and what you do is you climb into these and climb to about 20,000 feet and then flick the switch to arm the bomb, and then you jump out. Unfortunately, on several occasions when the pilot, it was an open cockpit, when the pilot and co-pilot flicked the switch to arm the bomb, it actually went off. And John F. Kennedy's older brother, Joseph Kennedy, who interestingly was the one being groomed by his father to be the next president of the United States, he was killed in one of these accidents in around 1944, and then the mantle of the presidency passed on to John F. Kennedy after his older brother Joseph died. After that, the program was pretty much shut down. While we don't evolve, then perhaps those who would do us harm they are continuing to evolve itself. And certainly in Central and the north part of Southern America, we're seeing increased use of very small drones with considerable lethality. There's no sound in this, but basically it's a quadcopter drone attached to a 9mm pistol. And actually you can see the supposed benefits of this. You just fly the drone into someone's house and do the needful. So yeah. Drone combat, and if any of you watch the Azerbaijan Armenian conflict, then clearly you'll know that drones are pretty bad. But don't worry, of course, because Donald Trump, one of his last sign-offs was actually to permit the sale of armed drones. So clearly don't panic. The US will sell you an armed drone. I always like this quote from Aldous Huxley. People who know me, it makes a change. Some of the Kipling quotes that I do, but if there's one lesson of history, is that we do not learn the lessons of history. We'll go over that in a bit more detail. People do think of drones as a very modern thing. I think I've alluded to that. But again, in the 60s, 1962, this is a Tomcat drone, through about 4,000 or 5,000 missions, reconnaissance missions over North Vietnam. That led to the development with the Israelis actually of these Pioneer drones, pretty simplistic, but of course they've got much more complex. And both the American and the British Air Force are actually looking at what's called the Loyal Wingman program. So, and there's a quote we'll come to a few times, is why send a human when you can actually send a machine? So the Loyal Wingman program is actually where you've got the F-35 or its successor, if it works, surrounded by these drones in really what is a drone swarm, and they can be controlled much as the way that modern electric drones are, to surround and be sacrificial if necessary. So people are talking about the plane that flies will have a drone swarm around. If you've ever seen G.I. Joe, Rise of Cobra or similar, as long as the drones don't turn on us, perhaps like Skynet, when Skynet becomes sentient, but that's another story. So drone swarms surrounding the plane itself, sacrificial, but also carrying payloads. We talk about drone rescue as well, but again, I wasn't there myself, but during the Vietnam War, they used drones, quite complex and sophisticated drones, to rescue people. And one of the first recoveries of a special forces soldier from the jungle took place with one of these remotely piloted drones, flew over the jungle, located the SF soldier. This was about 63, lowered the penetrator into the jungle. He pops on and away he goes. So drone search and rescue was around 60 years ago. This is one on a destroyer designed to be launched from a small ship. Again, double rotating blades, small footprint per se, and can actually rescue people. So fast forward 60 years later, and the UK Coast Guard last year just started to use rescue drones with infrared thermal imaging cameras to locate swimmers. And you can see that even just with one drone here, you've doubled the amount of sea that you can actually search. So UK is already using these Coast Guard rescue and imaging drones. The story for the UK is not one of great glory. I mean, we live in a congested urban environment. And what's certainly recently been shown in Sweden and particularly in the Netherlands is that actually the drone delivery of a defibrillator takes place much more rapidly than by an ambulance.
112 operator, what is your emergency?
It's my dad. I think he had a heart attack. Please help. He's not breathing anymore.
Please stay calm. What's your name?
Joanna.
Good, Joanna. We've got your location. The ambulance drone is on its way. Remove his top shirt to uncover his torso.
Okay.
Great. Can you go to the nearest exit? The ambulance drone is almost there.
Okay. I'm outside.
I'll be talking through the drone now, so you can put down the phone. Now please pick up the drone and bring it to your father. You're doing great. Okay, pull the green lid. Now place the pads on your father's chest. Good, I can see that the pads are properly applied. Joanna, please stay clear of your father. We'll take it from here.
Now, I hate to say that when I saw the lucky man rising up, I was reminded of perhaps of a zombie flesh eater movie where suddenly the dead come back to life. But joking apart, it's clear that in urban environments where the average distance from perhaps drone station to casualty can be about on average is about 3 kilometers. You can get a drone there in 5 to 8 minutes, which is clearly much quicker than in any congested urban environment. Are we top of the league? Well, let's look at some examples. Malawi, for the last 5 years, they've already used drones to retrieve blood samples from remote areas. In Uganda, particularly, where the roads are bad, and there's a lot of people live in communities in lakes, on islands in lakes and boats and the like, and it's of course difficult by conventional means to get HIV medication. In a country where about perhaps 18% of the population are actually HIV positive, there's a lot of HIV retrovirals need to be delivered. So Kanagala Islands on Lake Victoria, it's 84 islands. Now that's a tricky thing to deliver to, but of course they use drone technology. To be clear, they're already using, this isn't the future, they're already using this technology. Zipline will come on to in a sec. They're delivering COVID vaccines all around sort of Central Africa. So what about other third world countries? Sorry, I mean Scotland. So drones are being used now again to deliver coronavirus kit between hospitals, PPE, obviously the islands, Highlands and Islands. It's difficult to get to sometimes. You're reliant on the ferries. Why send a man in a plane when sometimes you can send a machine at no risk? So again, you can see bottom right, the Isle of Mull is trialing unmanned aircraft to distribute supplies. And again, courier blood samples around the place itself. I was chatting to the chief pharmacist on the Isle of Wight the other day, and we were chatting about one of the problems that they have, which is that they can't make up chemotherapy drugs on the Isle of Wight. They haven't got the clean room to do that. So up until now, that's meant that 500 people every week or every 2 weeks have to go across to the mainland on the ferries to get their chemotherapy. But what they're doing now is using chemotherapy. They're getting the drugs from Southampton, flying it to the Isle of Wight.
So it's a functional design. In fact, I like to think of it as a sort of Land Rover of the sky, a similar sort of niche in that it's very robust, very tough, very easy to repair, twin engines, so it's capable of flying on a single engine, therefore very reliable.
So certainly the night flight capability and all weather, if you've got someone that needs blood, and we'll get back to that a few times, I think, during the talk itself. But so 500 people every few weeks don't need to go to the mainland now. They can get their chemotherapy brought onto the Isle of Wight. And the bay size is quite reasonable. It holds about 100 kilograms. So that's quite a useful amount of cargo, one might say, almost enough for a human. China is using drones for disaster assessment, and also, of course, the Japanese. Fukushima, you don't really want to go into the ground zero at Fukushima, but of course, drones carrying Geiger counters and other analyzers can go into these areas and get very good data as to what is going on. And clearly, you probably want to wash them down when they come back. Pre-hospital, from the paramedic point of view, we've all done these classic things where you go around assessing a major incident and assessing, priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, or dead. But actually, again, why send a human when you can actually send a drone? And recent research clearly shows that actually using drone technology, it's actually faster and actually more accurate to send a drone, which can actually triage the scene itself. What about blood? Blood is a tricky thing. It's got a short shelf life, but it is a life-saving transfusion fluid. And what's interesting is already in parts of Africa, in Malawi and Rwanda particularly, if you're in a remote clinic and you've got women giving birth, one of the major non-trauma causes of death in Rwanda and Malawi is postpartum hemorrhage. Previously, that was a tricky situation to deal with unless you had a member of the family who could donate blood. But what you can do now simply is actually just you WhatsApp and the blood will come to you. And they've already delivered, I think, almost 100,000 units of blood. I've got a little video to show you, which is probably quite useful. And it's clear to see that that's an amazing way of doing it. And even if it crashes, it's got an emergency parachute. All the parts can simply be clipped back together. It's called frangible. So it doesn't actually, nothing actually snaps. It just sort of comes apart on impact. And since that video was made, I mean, it's now that 75, outside the capital of those two states, 75% of all blood deliveries in those two countries are now made by drones. Now that has clear military implications, which obviously is one of the other hats that I wear. And in remote areas, it's tricky sometimes to even get a ration pack and bullets, let alone actually blood. But certainly the Americans and the Australians working together have been using the zipline technology, and it's pretty, the stuff can fly fast, it can fly low, you can deliver to almost false tactical waypoints. So actually the drone itself already can be quite sneaky. So the Australians and the Americans recently delivered, as you can see, quite a lot of blood, quite a lot of product to a notional mass casualty in the middle of the Australian desert. So there's clear implications there of what can be done. So I alluded to the bottom right here, never send a human to do a machine's job. Now, we've all seen these guys and girls on the motorway, and they do a tremendous job. However, it has to be said it's done at personal risk. And I just beginning, and other people are beginning to realize as well, that actually humans on motorbikes at speed in tricky weather is probably not the way forward. So again, I'm not dissing what these guys and girls do, but I think the future definitely is drone blood delivery. And again, there's a number of companies looking at this in the heart of England and the like, and it's simply just, we've got to embrace this technology. Amazon already uses it. Other countries use it. We're actually quite behind the curve, because anyone who drives on the motorway system of England knows that it's congested, it's tricky. Interesting, of course, in Germany, if there's an accident, whatever, the law mandates the Germans to actually move to each side of the road to leave a clear passage for an ambulance to go through. We don't have that. And of course, many ambulances, and anyone who walks along the Bristol Road or the Pershore Road knows that I feel very sad for the ambulance drivers, because they just get stuck in traffic outside McDonald's and they just can't move. So again, in a couple of years' time, I think we will see drone ambulances, perhaps landing on the M42. Hopefully not while I'm traveling. But this is coming, and there's no way.
Researchers in California are developing an autonomous drone ambulance that could help get people to a hospital or get them out of harm's way in case of an emergency. CBS's Chris Martinez shows us how it all works.
Taking off in 3, 2, 1.
It's technology designed to save lives. Researchers at the California Institute of Technology describe this autonomous ambulance as the future of emergency response.
We're calling it actually a personal rescue system.
Professor Maury Garib says the self-flying rescue drone has been in development for 2 years. It's designed to rapidly fly a patient to a hospital or rendezvous point with a doctor. Researchers are testing this prototype, but they envision the life-size vehicle transporting people facing medical emergencies like heart attacks or strokes, and airlifting injured or trapped victims from hard-to-reach disaster areas, including wildfires or flood zones.
This is basically a hatch door that can open up.
Sensors inside will monitor the patient's vital signs during flight. With this one-of-a-kind wall, researchers are simulating nearly every weather condition to test how the drone responds. For now, they're using a 1/5 scale model, but the actual drone will be the size of a small car, and the final version will be piloted by an artificial intelligence system.
So militarily for us in the wars that we were fighting up until recently, this was our contingency reality, where in Afghanistan, when we had the helicopters, the big Chinook helicopters, that was fine. But towards the end or at the start of conflicts, you end up casevacing people in the back of Hilux trucks. And there's still an expectation from our commanders that when we go into the next conflict, wherever that is, that there's an expectation we will deliver this Western standard medical care. But the reality is that for many of our teams, training teams in Africa, the Middle East, and the like, is that there's multiple small remote teams. And how do we deliver Western standards of medical care to those people? This is an open source document, and it sort of puts things perhaps into context. Unfortunately, with a soldier, Guardsman Matthew Talbot, who was crushed by an elephant in Malawi 2 years ago, and unfortunately, despite the best efforts of the medics, he couldn't survive. And remember, this is the country where 75% of drone delivery of blood is drone delivered. The official inquiry concluded this, basically, that obviously he was crushed by the elephant, and that was tragic. But our British military's lack of blood products stored far forward was an aggravating factor. If he, I'm not saying it's true, but if he'd been a civilian, I believe he'd have a better chance of surviving. And to me, that's a damning indictment of where we are in terms of our forward provision of blood, where, you know, African countries are doing better than us, and, you know, soldiers are dying. So our current doctrinal status, moving swiftly on, is that we have this 10-1-2 timeline where buddy care, 10 minutes, application of tourniquets, and then 1 hour to damage control surgery, and then 2 hours to, you know, more efficient and better surgery. That takes a while, and you're transferring people from vehicle to vehicle to vehicle. And I think the future is going to be somewhat different.
The U.S. Army wants to develop an unmanned helicopter to evacuate wounded troops from the battlefield. A drone helicopter can land in areas deemed too dangerous for manned helicopters to land. A soldier on the ground can guide the drone to a safe landing using an iPad-like device. Among the drone's features would likely be a secure seat for the wounded soldier, a vital signs monitor, and a communications link to a medic. The Army would like the drone to be based on a platform already in service, such as the Northrop Grumman Fire Scout, Boeing Hummingbird, Sikorsky Blackhawk, or Cayman K-Max.
So what's interesting, actually, the US already have unmanned helicopters that they can fly. There's no reason we can't put people into them. We'll come over this in a sec. Robotic surgery, if you've seen Prometheus, clearly this is one of the ideas that people have had, where the robot surgeon, obviously a little less clunky than this, delivers your health care.
Got you covered. In position. Man down, man down. Medevac, medevac. Forceps.
My favorite Skynet moment. And, you know, I can tell you orthopedics is that simple. It probably isn't. And of course, the classic mistake there is when you take a bullet out of somebody, you must actually drop it in a metal container to make the actual clink sound. That was cancelled, and they that's the lesson of history, that they spent 49 million on that in 2007 and then cancelled it. But despite that, industry has continued to move forward. Sorry, oops, sorry. The drones are unmanned. We already have them. What's interesting, the Geneva Convention already talks about the use of Red Crosses on drones, and put a Red Cross on the drone is protected by the Geneva Convention. And the US already has a drone roadmap, and because people are worried about, you know, on the congested battlefield where the drone is, you know, crashes with a cruise missile in flight, clearly that would be bad. But they've already worked on the safe ride principles, the maximal G and the like. And what they point out here, I think that's what's going to happen, is that a cargo drone this year, maybe next year, will come forward and deliver rations, bullets, water. And there'll be somebody in a patrol house or in a remote area, could even be a Scottish island, that needs to be casevac back. We haven't got air superiority, so how do we get them back? And that's the first casualty. We put drone, big cargo bay, put in the casualty and send them back. And that's what's going to happen. and they have these safe ride standards, less than 2G in any axis. And again, you'll know that in the last, well, yesterday, the North Koreans launched 2 ballistic missiles. 3 days ago, they launched their first sort of Tomahawk-style cruise missile. So if we go to war in North Korea, which would be bad, or with Taiwan versus China, that we won't have air superiority. So how do we casevac those patients? How do we get them back to Rule 2, Rule 3? That's something for us all to think about. So the US has actually gone back on board with this, and they've now put out a tender 2 years ago to, as you can see, produce a low-cost aerial platform, 100-mile radius, speeds above 100 knots, ready to go. So for us, and I think also for civilians, we'll be looking at injury in the middle of nowhere, straight into the drone, and back to myself here, my friend Nigel, at the Rule 2, sort of forward small combat hospital, you know, ready to deliver care. So what care can we deliver in a drone? So sort of arbitrarily, but talk about level 0, which is a lone patient by themselves in the drone. Level 1 is an en route, either a paramedic or a tactical combat care provider. Level 2, more interventional care, we'll cover that. And level 3, which we can do a bit, is en route surgical care. Sorry, I've got. I mistakenly pressed screen share there, so we've got coming off that. So just start that again, sorry. This is sort of level 0, which I think you'll agree when you see this in a second. It's a little bit edgy, a little bit, what you might say, whoa. Okay, so that's the little bit worse. So level 0, patient by themselves. You have to have a lot of belief in a drone to actually get onto one of those. But there are other vehicles out there. This is a DP-14 Hawk, which is like a small double rotor aircraft. And it's got a patient-sized load bay. And of course, you can actually put monitoring into the load bay itself. This is one of the ones that's in development by the US. And it can just sit on a landing pad by itself for days at a time. Unlike pilots, never gets tired or irritable. And it flies by itself. It's not controlled. It's autonomous, has line of sight, GPS, could fly about 2.5 hours. And there's an onboard generator for all your monitoring. The Israelis have maintained their progress with drones. This is the Cormorant UAV, based on what's called air mule technology, uses ducted fans. It's got the benefit of ducted fans is that they don't chop your head off when you stand up underneath them. Most helicopters, even small ones, have like a 10-meter rotor radius that you don't want to get involved in. But a Cormorant with its ducted fans is much smaller. As you can see, there's space to hang up fluids, which of course ideally should be blood. They've been doing flight testing for about 4 years. And just to be clear, this drone flies itself. No one's flying it, it's autonomous. You program in waypoints, it comes to your house, comes to your casualty, and then you press the button and off it goes back to the hospital. You've always got to love the music of these things. I say with the red cross on the side, this is protected by the Geneva Convention, which if your foes have signed up for it, is clearly handy. Okay. And Israelis are looking at actually the drone that can actually defend itself, which is allowed again under the Geneva Convention. And these things have 500-kilometer plus radiuses, so you can actually site your surgical team in another country. And we talk about speed in a sec. But as we move on to perhaps someone on the drone, slightly larger drone, what can we do? Roboa, foams, blood, junctional tourniquets, automated access. There's a lot of stuff on the horizon that can be done inside a drone. And also the aircraft, even simply that we can actually put people onto, are improving all the time. The US Army is looking at what's called its Future Vertical Lift Program. This is the Boeing SB-1. All these have drone models that come with them. The one that's probably going to win the contract is the Bell Valor 280. 280 because it can fly at 280 knots, which is over 220 miles an hour. So actually, that means in 20 minutes, it can fly 100 miles. So your surgical team, 20 minutes away, can be in an entirely other country. What's interesting about those is if you know the CV-22 or MV-22 Ospreys, in fact, well, the whole engine rotates. With these, just the gearbox rotates, and that's the 240, 280. The 247 Vigilant drone is the slightly down market version. This is a drone based on the same technology. It's called the 247 because it cruises at 247 knots, which is just about 280 miles an hour. So again, 20-minute flight time, you can be 100 miles away. Clearly for half an hour, but for an hour, you can be 250 miles away and still get the casualty to hospital in an hour. That is clear military and civilian applications. And it can carry a 13,000-pound payload, which is enough for quite a large team on board. So all the drones and the vertical takeoff aircraft, they're going to change the future. They're vertical takeoff and they have got speed. Now I'm picking a random country here, I don't know why, but if you want to get casualties to hospital within an hour, with sort of our US and coalition, that was us, population densities, you'd need this many Rule 2, Rule 3 facilities. If your rescue aircraft drone can fly at 250 knots, you need less. And of course, what we know is that surgeon volume, and of course, anaesthetist volume, and institutional volume, the more trauma that goes to an institution in a learning environment, the better it gets. And obviously, when I was in Bastion, 2013, we had the 2 CT scanners, we had 400 units of blood, 400 units of plasma, etc. Hungry surgical teams, hungry anaesthetists, which is a sight to see. But if you can get to 300 knots, you can cover an entire country with basically 5 or 6 level 3 trauma centers, which get the best outcomes. And the same holds true for this country as well. The faster you can get people to hospital, the less trauma centers you need. And actually, because of the volume that you're giving them, the better they will get. So again, what can you do en route? Well, lots of things you can do. Inside even a small aircraft, you can do lots of life-saving interventions. You can even take them into space. But obviously, if you're looking for something that's dropped on the floor, you've got to watch the G's as well. But about 2 G's is probably enough. Otherwise, people and the casualty starts floating away. And if you look at technologies that are currently in use, so instead of having blood, plasma, making them up, of course, London Air Ambulance has started putting blood on its helicopters just about 3 years ago. What's interesting, of course, is at the third Battle of Ypres, I wasn't there myself, that they were taking blood forward to the trenches in 1917. So 104 years ago, we're learning to put blood on helicopters. And of course, in the UK and in the Midlands with the refill trial, we're putting blood back onto ambulances. But just imagine you're in the middle of nowhere in the UK, and do you want to wait for a guy on a motorbike, or you can get the blood delivered to you by drone. And again, this is our classic en route care. Screaming paramedic, guy top left, squeezing in the blood, guy top right, squeezing in the plasma. One bag, of course, makes one of them have hands. You room to stand up where you kneel So actually, what you can do is virtually limitless in larger drones. Now, some of the stuff's a bit fanciful. This is like a transformer vehicle. I keep expecting this to sort of, I turn my head and it turns into Bumblebee, but that's not going to happen. My colleague Tom Rowland, flight aircraft UK, looking TXA. So TXA, and again, the research shows that the earlier you give TXA, the better. So just a couple of years ago now, the government said, here, have £5 million to develop TXA. And then governments being governments, I'm not really looking for CBE, but just a few weeks ago, Gavin Williamson, who was he? So 2019, he said, here, have the money. And then about 8 weeks ago, they said, no, we're taking the money back off you. Go and develop your own TXA auto-injector. So go figure. But, we can do level, do in-flight ICU, basically critical care, in-flight, releases to the left, releases to the right, that's good. So there are advantages to UAVs, and as they get bigger and they can fly for longer periods, they can actually do a lot. But I'm not saying there aren't disadvantages. There's battle space management. You don't want to be sort of crashing into things in the air, but a Red Cross is protective for those of us who are signatories of the Geneva Convention. And it's a continuously evolving technology. This was made 2019, so 2 years ago. Kidneys in, I think this was Baltimore actually, delivered by drone. More recent research actually just published, I think it was just a few weeks ago. To be honest, surgeons don't care how the kidney or the liver gets to them. Transplant surgeons, usually pretty picky sort of people, but surgeons feel the present system of organ transportation needs reform. And what they're saying is, rather than go courier flight, and actually just stick the organ with appropriate care into a UAV or unmanned aerial vehicle, and just fly it directly to the hospital where it's needed. So the way ahead, well, paramedics shot into space, great idea. So we're not talking about space trauma guidelines, although I do love this picture. Obviously, don't stick things in the spacesuits, otherwise you'll die. But there's lots of things we can actually use pre-hospitally and in flight. I've done some work in abdominal aortic tourniquets, which is basically a tourniquet you put around the abdomen, and it presses the aorta and the IVC into the spinal column, and basically inflate it. And within 30 seconds, you've stopped all common femoral artery blood flow. Abdominal foams, that's a way people are looking at, again, militarily and also in remote areas, where you actually stick a trocar into the abdomen and fill the abdomen with what's basically builder's foam. And again, that's gaining traction. So what happens is you stick a trocar into the umbilicus. Again, it's not risk-free. Signed in a sec.
The Arsenal foam technology has been engineered to treat life-threatening, non-compressible abdominal trauma. This product, shown here treating an acute liver injury, is injected as 2 liquid phases. Upon mixing, A chemical reaction is initiated, causing the material to expand throughout the abdominal cavity, making contact with sites of injury and creating a tamponade effect to stop bleeding. The product molds to the anatomy, allowing injured patients to be transported to surgical care where it can be removed.
So there's no reason why, of course, paramedics en route, if you're looking at a 1 hour transfer, or for whatever reason it's a long transfer, and you've got intratorso hemorrhage, that actually stick in the trocar, fill the abdomen with foam, and off you pop. And again, US animal research shows clearly this is quite a significant portal vein injury. And what you can see here is that with foam injected into the abdomen, that the animal model, they survive out to an hour, whereas this devastating hemorrhage, half the animals died within 60 minutes. In fact, half the animals died within about 20 minutes. So there's a lot of work being done. This was just published in March this year, but abdominal injury plus foam. And I think that's going to be the future for many of us. So people are worried that the first time it's done, they'll be sort of worried about what needs to be done for the casualty. But actually, again, a recent study looking at, just again this year, looking at casevacs over a couple of years in Afghan and Iraq, half the casualties didn't need any life-saving intervention in flight, or actually en route. So that's where I think the drone coming forward, delivering the rations, delivering the water and the meal, a casualty with a limb injury or something similar, or even eye injury, it's going to be popped into the drone and back they go. So drone guidelines 2025, I think blood's going to be delivered by drone. I think we will see paramedics in drones, obviously not the ones that get airsick too easily, but the interventions that paramedics can provide, airway control, blood, I think that's going to be the way forward. Obviously nurses as well. Level 2, I think, is that en route, more significant interventional doctor-led care, foams, abdominal tourniquets, possibly Reboa, but the jury's out on that. And level 3 is perhaps where it's going to be for the people I'm training now, en route surgical care in drones in flight, and then sitting back to watch the in-flight movie. So in summary, level 0, bang on the tourniquet, stick on the oxygen, stick on the pelvic binders, active warming, TXA, thanks Gavin, you have to make it up yourself. Antibiotic injection. Level 1, onward paramedic, blood transfusion, active wound management, obviously airway control, nerve catheters, foams. Level 2, well, that's for the rest of you out there. The world is your lobster, in what I prefer to say. And I think only imagination stops your thinking. So it's going to be commonplace, as Spock said. Change is the essential process of all existence, but it's coming. It's there now. I mean, the drones are already delivering Amazon parcels. They're delivering blood. They're delivering chemotherapy. They're delivering organs. Very soon, they're going to start delivering patients. So we need to be ready. I published some stuff on this. My email addresses are here. I'll take questions in a sec. But again, I'm happy to take questions offline as well. Thank you very much.